Those of you who have taken our short classes know this is my absolute favorite topic. It's because so many people don't do it well, and so many people don't know how to do it. So if you've never heard of it, don't worry. If you don't think you're doing a good job, again, totally okay. Most people write a whole memoir and don't do it because they don't really know how. And most people who are doing takeaway do it because they have a natural predisposition to write in this way and probably don't even totally realize the extent to which they're doing it. So we have, in some ways, kind of come in and taken over this space of takeaway in memoir world, because I hear other people talking about it, but not teaching it to the degree that we're teaching it. And the reason that we do teach it to the degree that we teach it, again, stems from my time at Seal Press, where I spent 8 years acquiring memoir. And every single memoir that we acquired, the editorial team first and then the marketing team, we'd come in and they'd say, well, what's the takeaway? And I had to think of it. And so I started reading these memoirs looking for moments of takeaway, because the more that the writers are consciously or even sometimes unconsciously doing takeaway, the easier it is for people like me who read books for a living to see, oh, okay, this is what's in it for the reader. That's really what takeaway is. What is in the book for the person reading it? And we're going to look at this some more. I think it's the heart of memoir. We think it's the heart of memoir because you'll see what it does. It brings a depth and a universality to memoir writing. And as I was saying earlier, that a lot of you are most definitely writing your memoirs for yourself, but there's this other entity, your readership, your audience, for whom you're writing as well. And so it's a both and it's great to write for yourself, but if you're not writing at all with a reader in mind, you're probably not doing takeaway. And it's the heart of memoir, because another thing that is complementary to this conversation is that very few people are buying your memoir because they care about you. They're, you're a couple people, 4 or 5 maybe if you're lucky. Most of them are buying the memoir because the topic resonates with them and they want to learn something about themselves. Memoir readers are very selfish. They want stuff for them. And so if you think about that, takeaway has even more value, because you're actually consciously thinking to yourself as you're writing, what am I giving my reader? So takeaway offers a mirror to the reader through a shared moment of connection, often using the second person, not always, or through conveying a bigger picture message through a shared human experience, facts or statistics, personal philosophy, or other teaching. So I'm going to drill down into each of these things today. This is probably the most in-depth takeaway teaching I've ever done. So it feels exciting to me. And let's look at what they are. We're starting with Linda Joy and her new book, Song of the Plains. The goal here is to connect or relate to the reader. That's one reason to do takeaway. So she writes, it's more than eyes and hair, the curve of a cheek, the shape of a lip, a smile, a happy temperament. We inherit many things in our genes, but here's a question. How much is nature versus nurture? Science tells us that our cells are marked by what has happened in the past long before we became embodied, and we carry fragments of our past history from ancestors whose names we don't know. Yet, we come into the world with our own story set in the stars, our own fingerprints and personality, our own magic and shine. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
This is the opening of the book, and it's a takeaway. It's very powerful. It connects immediately to the reader because it's not about Linda Joy. It's about so much more than that. It's about her themes. It's about what she's going to talk about. She sets the stage for what she's going to write about. That our cells are marked by what has happened in the past, long before we became embodied. It's about understanding her family. It's about the magic of being and what carries down through the ages. And so right away you're hooked, because it's not like, I'm Linda Joy and I'm 10 years old and this is the story of blah, 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 you know, because then you might be interested, but you might go, okay, I mean, this is very gripping, and it's why it's a takeaway is, again, because it taps into something universal, and she's using the word we. We inherit, okay? What has happened long before we became embodied, we carry fragments, yet we come into the world. Now, she's going to transition into the first person at some point right away. But one way that takeaway happens is through the we and the second person you, which you'll see a lot. And so you have to get comfortable using that voice, because therein lies the real power of takeaway. And if you read memoirs today, you see increasingly people are doing this. Let me switch the slide. The next example is Body 2.0. This is a new book out on She Writes Press, beautifully written about a woman who gets a elective double mastectomy. And so the goal here is to show the nature of something, in this case, pain. When I teach my students, sometimes I'm looking at like the nature of something, okay? They'll be talking about shame or grief or anything that comes up in your memoir as an emotion. If you have the capacity to stop and then drop down into that emotion and write about that emotion, the nature of that emotion, that is an opportunity for takeaway. Because why? It's a universal human experience that you're writing about. You're stopping your scene. It's narration, but you're writing about the nature of something. Here, writing about pain. Endurance pain will not relent with change, as indeed this flavor of pain has changed you. Notice the use of the second person. Loved ones may find you unrecognizable. You will see life through different eyes. In fact, endurance pain affords us the incredible opportunity to shed many useless cultural constructs, like superficial success, unfulfilling relationships, and external validation. Here comes the tricky part. See how she uses that? It's a command. Okay, here comes the tricky part. Endurance pain by nature, she's saying what it is. Endurance pain by nature is all-consuming. It seeps into every cell. It colors your every thought. It affects your every action. Although it is a deep existential challenge, the beautiful gift of endurance pain is that you can consciously, intentionally shape how this pain changes you. I love this passage. I think it's incredibly powerful, and she's not afraid to say what endurance pain feels like, because she's been there and she knows what it feels like. A lot of people feel like they don't have the authority to speak to something that is a universal human experience. Well, what if someone else doesn't feel the way I feel? Well, that's my experience. You have to break out of that. You have to make an assumption that the powerful thing that you're writing about, that you have lived by just the lived experience of it, is going to resonate on the page with other people who have gone through what you've gone through. This is such an important piece of memoir writing, you guys. I can't say enough about it. And I got chills reading that, because and when I'm talking about the heart of memoir writing, this should touch you in your heart. Like, oh my God, that kind of pain. Even if I don't know that pain as directly as she does. And so it doesn't have to be pain. It can be whatever it is for you. You know, loss, recovery. It could be a positive emotion too. We're not only talking negative. But I really want to encourage you guys to look at these things deeply. Drinking a Love Story by Carolyn Knapp, another woman who knows how to share a universal truth. This is a writer who does not shy away from saying how it is. She goes out on a limb, and maybe because she's a journalist, maybe because she has confidence, who knows what the reason is, but I want to give you all permission to assert your authority of experience in your memoirs. The comfort was enormous. It was an easier, stronger version of myself, as though I'd been coated from the inside out with warm liquid armor. It's true. It's a statement of fact. Okay, listen to that. It's true. It's a statement of fact that alcohol was the key to that feeling. She's talking about herself, but she's saying factually, this is true about alcohol for me. And I love this because it's takeaway, but it's in the first person. That may be one of liquor's most profound and universal appeals to the alcoholic. The way it generates a sense of connection to others, the way it numbs social anxiety and dilutes feelings of isolation, gives you a sense of access to the world. You're trapped in your own skin and thoughts. You drink, you are released just like that. So, I mean, if you are not an alcoholic, you feel it. If you are an alcoholic, you're like, yeah. So it's really, really powerful stuff, okay? And she is not afraid to say how it is. And this is, again, you know, if I can't, I'll say it 100 times. You guys can't be afraid to just assert your experience and to say, this is my truth, and it's your truth too. Someone could go, no, that's not how I feel. 1% of her possible readers who don't like, you know, so it's really important to just go out on a limb all the way. Jessica Valenti's new book, already a bestseller in hardcover. Jessica is an amazing writer, and this book is very, very in your face, which is her thing. I love this book. I think Jessica has really captured, you know, the essence of something too, just like the cultural zeitgeist right now with just how it is to be a woman. The goal is to convey a bigger picture message. Being treated nicely felt wrong somehow, as if we were acting out what a relation should be rather than being in it. For men who hate women, an admission like this one is proof that, see, women want a guy who treats them like women want a guy who treats them like shit, but that's not true either. What's closer to the truth is that when confronted with the love you deserve, it is easier to mock it than to accept it. Especially when everything else you have experienced of love and connection is based on something more like control or disdain.
Wow.
So again, she's going out on a limb. Maybe you have never been in a problematic relationship. But, you know, I think this is really something to look at, right? When you're scared, like, who are those people that you're going to offend, right? That's so often the case. Well, I don't want to say that. What if my reader doesn't agree with me? It's always happening when I'm giving this feedback about takeaway. So this is a powerful one. And I love what she says here. What's closer to the truth is that when confronted with the love you deserve, okay, it is easier to mock than to accept. And so she's using the you, as are so many other people here. And it's going to feel uncomfortable to you in the beginning. It's going to feel like, am I allowed to say that? But you're really talking about yourself. That's what's important to remember about the second person. When you're writing in second person, you could write it in the first person and then swap out the word you for I. And that way you can make sure to connect to your heart center, your experience, your personal truth, but then feel that comfort to direct it back out to the reader. And you want to do that. It's important for capturing that powerful message we're trying to get at here. Okay. Brain on Fire, this is the one that we just taught. We just got finished with last week. We teach a best-selling memoir course every fall and every spring, which many of you have taken. This is totally different. The goal is to teach. It has a different flavor. If you guys have an issue-driven memoir or something that you're really trying to, like an advocacy kind of memoir, this might be appropriate for you to weave in at different points. So she's talking about science. My short-term memory had been obliterated, a problem usually rooted in the hippocampus, which is like a way station for new memories. The hippocampus briefly stores the patterns of neurons that make up a memory before passing them along to the parts of the brain responsible for preserving them long-term. Memories are maintained by the areas of the brain responsible for the initial perception. A visual memory is saved by the visual cortex in the occipital lobe, an auditory memory by the auditory cortex of the temporal lobe, and so forth. to understand how important the hippocampus is to the circuitry of the brain, all you have to do is consider what happens when it is removed. And then she tells a story of someone who had their hippocampus removed and what happened. This is sort of dense. It really gets into some nitty-gritty stuff about the hippocampus and the brain. But her book is about having an inflamed brain. And what happened to her was crazy. People thought she was psychotic. She was diagnosed with bipolar, with schizophrenia, all of this before they finally discovered that in essence she had encephalitis. And they were able to cure her. And so the science part is actually really important. And so is the advocacy part of her message of the book is how many other people potentially are having these symptoms who have been diagnosed as schizophrenic or whatever. It had a very powerful impact when it first came out around patient advocacy. So the fact that she gets into these teaching messages is very appropriate for her book. It's not going to be appropriate for everyone, but what the point of the takeaway is today is to show that there are lots of different ways to do takeaway. It's not only the universal connection that we saw Linda Joy doing at the beginning of her book, or these powerful relating around a particular emotion, or going out on a limb like this is a universal human truth and we all know what this feels like. It's also teaching in other ways. You want to find ways to do one of these. And so if you liked or really your mind clicked around one of these things and you go, oh, I can do that. I know a universal message and how to talk about that. Or I can talk about the nature of this or that. So you can go through an already written chapter and dive in at certain points and test drive takeaway. And it's really exciting. I've seen some of my writers transform their writing just by understanding that this is accessible to them. Because all of a sudden they're deep diving into these various places where we're having profound insights all over the place around things that make all of a sudden your story, which was like you, and then you did this, and then you did this. This is like, right? Stuff is happening for the reader that is way bigger than only your story, which is still the through line and still important.